Tragic end to bucket list adventure. Tourist swept away by Arctic River during ice floating experience in Russia. A dream trip to the Arctic Circle turned into tragedy when a 57-year-old tourist from Belarus was swept away by a powerful current during an ice floating session in northern Russia. The woman, whose name was not been released, vanished while taking part in the New Year's Day activity on the Tuloma River near the town of Kola, just south of Murmansk. Okay, let's really get into this story on the AI
Welcome
podcast.
back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into a story that it really gets at the fragility of life when adventure tourism goes wrong.
Terribly wrong.
We've got your sources here, a whole stack of articles about an activity in the Russian Arctic called ice floating. And what's so striking is the paradox. It's marketed as this, therapeutic, completely safe bucket list experience. But in this case, it led directly to a catastrophe. Okay, let's unpack this. So the event itself, the core of this, it happened on New Year's Day
Right, January 1st.
on the Tuloma River near a town called Kola, which is just south of Murmansk, way up in Russia's far north.
Deep in the Arctic Circle.
And a 57-year-old tourist from Belarus, she was doing one of these ice floating sessions. She got swept away by a current and, well, she's now presumed dead.
It's just a devastating story. And for our deep dive, our mission has to be to go beyond that headline. It's not just about a tragic accident. We really need to analyze the confluence of factors. What that means is understanding the activity itself, the sheer extremity of the Arctic environment in winter, and this is the critical part, the specific safety failures that turned this dream trip into a complete disaster.
Let's start with the person at the center of this, because the sources, they paint a really clear picture of her.
Yeah, her motivation is so important here.
She wasn't just some casual tourist. Her family described her as really energetic, curious. This trip was a genuine, long-held dream for her.
A true bucket list item.
Exactly. She went to the Kola Peninsula specifically to see the polar night, to look for whales, to really experience the Arctic.
And that kind of powerful motivation is what the industry preys on in a way. It's what sells these experiences. And ice floating is packaged perfectly for that.
It is. The whole concept sounds amazing. You're put into these specialized dry
The
suits.
thermal flotation gear, yeah.
They're designed for full insulation, buoyancy, protection from that freezing water. And the promoters, they sell it as this unique relaxation thing, even a health treatment. I saw one claim in the sources, and it's just chilling now, that said it's almost impossible to drown in.
What's fascinating here is that claim versus the reality.
Yeah.
There's this massive disconnect between the marketing and what actually happens when you're in moving water.
Right.
The suits, yes, they keep you alive passively, they float you, they insulate you. But the trade-off is they make you, for all intents and purposes, immobile.
So they ensure your survival, but prevent your own rescue. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely. You're just floating on your back encased in this big, bulky shell. You have no real mobility. You are 100% reliant on the safety systems around you.
Because you can't swim, you can't propel yourself anywhere.
Not at all. And because of that, ice floating is normally done under really strict supervision.
Yeah.
Participants are often tethered, or they're kept in a small, controlled, still section of water.
Because if you lose someone,
You're immediately fighting the full force of the environment.
and the speed here is just. It's horrifying. The sources say the woman was swept away and gone, completely out of sight, within 40 minutes of even getting in the river.
40 minutes.
That's barely enough time to even get used to the water.
That 40-minute window, it tells you everything. It says the current was incredibly fierce, and whatever safety protocols were supposed to be there, tethers, spotters, boats, they failed almost instantly.
So once she was swept away, the clock starts ticking for the rescuers. And here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah, the environment itself becomes the enemy.
It wasn't just a threat to her. It was the biggest obstacle for any rescue attempt.
Yeah.
The conditions they faced were just brutal.
We're talking air temperatures around minus 30 Celsius, bone-chilling cold.
But the darkness, that was just as big a problem. They were in the middle of the polar night.
And we need to be clear about what that means. It's not just a long night. The sun literally does not rise at all.
So it's 247 darkness.
Near total darkness. Now, you try finding a person in a dark suit, floating in a huge river in those conditions, it's almost impossible.
It just shrinks the search area to practically nothing. And then you layer fog on top of that.
And this wasn't just, a misty morning. This was a very specific and very dangerous environmental phenomenon.
Exactly. This was a unique feature of the Tuloma River. See, the area where the river meets the sea, it doesn't completely freeze over, even at -30.
Which seems counterintuitive. Why not?
It's the tidal influence. You've got this constant, powerful push of slightly warmer seawater from the bay. It just prevents a stable sheet of ice from ever forming.
So you have open water, which also means you have a current, a very strong one.
And when that intensely cold Arctic air hits the relatively warmer surface of the river,
You get fog.
you get dense, rapidly forming sea smoke. It reduces visibility to almost zero. The president of the Kola Tourism Association, Elena Lanovaya, she said it perfectly. She said, the bay is steaming, visibility is extremely poor. And the place where the swim took place has a strong current. The tourist was just carried away and was, quote, rapidly no longer visible.
That just paints a picture of complete helplessness, a powerful current you can't fight, in total darkness, with zero visibility.
Any rescue attempt was doomed from the start.
It was. The environment itself was an immediate death sentence once she was separated. Given the cold, the exposure, the fact that rescuers couldn't see anything, the authorities had to pivot really fast.
Rescue to recovery.
Exactly. They were operating on the tragic assumption that she couldn't have survived more than a few hours out there. That was the entire window. A few hours.
Which brings us to the failures, the human element in all of this. Russia's investigative committee launched a criminal probe almost immediately.
And they moved fast.
A key finding came out very quickly. The organizer of the whole thing has been charged.
Which is crucial because that gets right to the breach of trust. The marketing versus the reality.
Right. And they were very specific about what went wrong. They confirmed a conclusive equipment failure. The thermal suits they were using. Seized. Declared unsafe.
So the gear didn't even meet safety standards.
No. That promise that it was almost impossible to drown in was, well, it was a lie, backed up by faulty, substandard equipment.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the gear, as bad as that is, might not even be the most damning part of this story. Because this entire tragedy was predictable, completely predictable, based on local knowledge.
What do you mean?
The local residents, the people who live there, who work on that river, they had been warning operators for a long time that that specific section of the Tuloma River is dangerous.
So this wasn't just a random act of nature. It was a known hazard.
A known, documented local hazard. It's famous for these sudden, treacherous underwater currents that just intensify out of nowhere.
And that goes back to the tidal acceleration you mentioned.
Precisely. The report suggests this incident probably happened during low tide when the water is rushing out toward the sea with maximum force. To operate any tourist activity there in those conditions, it's not just negligence. It's a deliberate disregard for clear warnings.
Hold on. If the locals all knew this spot was a death trap, how was a tour company even allowed to operate there? That sounds like a massive regulatory failure.
It absolutely is. And that's underscored by the fact that this wasn't a one-off. It wasn't the first time they had a problem.
There was another incident.
A very, very close call. The sources mention that just last month, tourists from India and China were swept away in the same region during a similar session.
You're kidding.
No. And they were only rescued, and this is the key phrase, by chance.
What does that mean? By chance?
It means their own safety boats, their own protocols didn't save them. A completely separate, unrelated boat just happened to be nearby and saw them and pulled them out of the water.
So the company's safety system had already failed catastrophically weeks before this, and they just kept going.
They kept going. It establishes a clear, deadly pattern.
So what does this all mean? When you put it all together, it's just this catastrophic convergence. You have a tourist fulfilling a beautiful dream.
Colliding with the brutal reality of the Arctic environment.
And then you add in unsafe equipment and a company operating in a location with known hazards that they were repeatedly warned about.
The charges against the organizer, they cover the gear and the supervision. But the deep dive here reveals the systemic issue, the acceptance of risk. When a whole community is telling you, don't go there, it's dangerous, and you do it anyway for profit, that goes way beyond a faulty zipper on a suit.
It's a sobering end to what was meant to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. That dream of seeing the polar night, has now raised these really painful questions about the safety standards for the entire Arctic tourism industry.
Yeah, and the key takeaway for you, for anyone listening, is to see this dangerous contrast. The contrast between the marketing, which promises this impossible safety, and the cold reality of ignoring expert local knowledge.
That failure to prioritize safety over profit seems to be a theme in these kinds of incidents.
It's a recurring theme, absolutely.
The investigation confirmed the gear was unsafe.
Right.
Organizer is charged. So there's a level of accountability there for the immediate failures. But here's the thought I want to leave you with. Given the known environmental risks of that exact spot, the currents, the fog, the fact that there was a near miss that was ignored just weeks before, does charging one organizer go far enough? Is focusing on the criminal negligence of one person obscuring the bigger systemic need to maybe permanently restrict this activity in that specific volatile location altogether?
Yeah.
That's something to really think about.
Okay, one question for you. How could an activity promoted as almost impossible to drown end in a fatal disappearance? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.